My wife was calm, even with a gun pointed at her, no raised voice, no shaking hands, just a quiet sentence that made the man freeze. "If you so much as touch that weapon, I'll make sure you're in custody by nightfall." He didn't know it yet, but he just pulled a gun on the wrong person. Because the woman standing in front of him wasn't just another homeowner. She led a federal task force for the FBI. But let's rewind a bit. Before the armed standoff, before the fake citations, before this guy decided to cosplay as a cop with a dollar store badge, it started with something that almost seemed harmless, a piece of paper on our windshield, folded, typed, unsigned. Reminder, street parking is restricted. Please relocate your vehicle to the driveway. HOA compliance will be enforced. We didn't even have a homeowners association, which made the message interesting. I showed it to my wife that morning over coffee. She read it once and said, "Well, that's cute. She doesn't rattle easy." You can't when your day job is untangling international fraud rings and testifying in federal court. But this was just annoying. At first, the next day, a notice showed up in the mailbox. Violation. Improper trash bin storage, $50 fine. And that's when we started paying attention. Because whoever was playing HOA in our neighborhood wasn't just pretending to have authority, they were escalating. We lived in a part of town that had once had an HOA years ago. But when the original developer went belly up, the structure collapsed, and no official board replaced it. No active HOA, no dues, no board meetings, just neighbors managing their own homes, which meant anyone enforcing rules now was doing so illegally. We started seeing the same fake notices pop up on other houses, folded flyers, made-up fines. Enforcement warnings for grass height, mailbox paint, even kids riding scooters on sidewalks, and all of them were signed the same way, HOA Enforcement Officer M. That was our first red flag. The second came the following Monday. My wife had set up a small camera above our front door just to keep an eye on deliveries. That morning we reviewed the footage. At 6:43 a.m. a man walked up our driveway, black tactical pants, black polo shirt, plastic badge clipped to his belt, clipboard in one hand and a firearm on his hip. He walked right up to our mailbox, inserted a paper, took a photo of our front lawn and left. We zoomed in. He wasn't a cop, not even close. The badge looked cheap, silver plastic, like something from a costume aisle. His belt had a flashlight, a holster, and some random keychains, but nothing about him was official. And that gun, it looked very real. We took a screenshot, printed it. That evening, my wife said something I hadn't heard her say in a long time. "This guy's going to screw up, and when he does, we're going to be ready." We didn't have to wait long. A few days later, my wife was home alone, working remotely. I was running errands across town when her phone pinged with a motion alert. The same man was outside, not on the sidewalk, not at the mailbox on our porch. He was looking directly into the camera, knocked twice, waited, then left something taped to the door and walked off. My wife opened the door and grabbed the paper. It read, "Final warning. Continued violations will result in direct enforcement action." No phone number, no contact, no organization letterhead, just the same fake signature, Officer M. She texted me a photo of it. I called her immediately. "You okay?" "I'm fine," she said, "but this guy's getting bolder." That night we checked the footage again. Same guy, same walk, same badge. Only this time he rested his hand on his weapon before knocking. That changed everything. We called the non-emergency line and reported a potential case of impersonating law enforcement. The officer we spoke to was polite but vague. "We'll take a look," he said. That wasn't enough. So we got proactive. My wife pulled property records, ran public searches, and even checked local business licenses. Nothing. No active HOA. No enforcement entity named Oak Valley Standards or HOA Security. And no officer with a last name starting with M licensed to carry. It was a total fabrication. We printed everything, filed an official report, but the moment things really shifted came 3 days later. It was late afternoon. I was in the backyard trimming tree branches when I heard my wife's voice, clear, steady, and loud enough to cut through the air. "Take your hand off that weapon, now." I dropped the shears and ran. By the time I rounded the corner, I saw him, the fake cop, standing in our driveway, one hand on his clipboard, the other on the grip of his pistol. And across from him was my wife, phone in hand, recording everything. "This is private property," she said. "You are not law enforcement. You have no jurisdiction here. If you draw that weapon, you're going to prison." He didn't speak, didn't blink. He just stood there, like he was waiting for something. Then my wife took one step forward and said, "I'm a federal officer, and this entire interaction is being documented. You have 5 seconds to leave." He broke, turned, walked off fast, no words, no threats. He got in his car and sped off. We called it in. Again. But this time with video evidence and a direct threat. My wife didn't mention her FBI credentials on the report. Not yet. She didn't want to scare him off. She wanted to know how far he'd go. Because now, this wasn't about fake fines. It was about a man impersonating authority, carrying a weapon and threatening homeowners. And he had no idea who he was dealing with. The video didn't just show a man with a fake badge. It showed him standing on our property, armed, silent, and ready to intimidate. And for anyone watching it without context, they'd think he was a real cop. That's what made it dangerous. My wife watched the footage twice, then opened a secure laptop and started logging everything. Time, date, location, his body language, the weapon, the threat level. She didn't just treat it like a neighborhood dispute. She treated it like a federal case, because that's what it was now. We still hadn't revealed her credentials to anyone, not even the responding officer who came out after the incident. He was polite, took the report, glanced at the footage and said, "We'll flag it and keep an eye out." But that was all, no follow-up, no urgency, and that told us everything. This guy wasn't on the radar. There was no file, no alert, no record. Which meant we were going to have to build the case ourselves, and we weren't the only ones paying attention. The next day, 2 neighbors came to our door. One of them, Mrs. Klein, a widow in her 70s, had a stack of papers in her hand. "Have you been getting these?" she asked. My wife invited her in. The other neighbor, a young couple who just moved in 2 months ago, joined us around the kitchen table. They laid out what they'd received: notices, citations, threats, all signed by HOA enforcement officer M, all threatening fines or legal action. One even had a QR code that linked to a shady-looking payment portal. That's when my wife said it out loud. "He's not just pretending to be authority. He's extorting people." We asked if anyone had actually paid. The couple nodded. They'd paid 3 fines, $75, $50, and $200, total $325. They thought it was real. They didn't want to make trouble. That was the pattern: intimidate the quiet ones, scare the busy ones, harass the vulnerable ones. It wasn't about enforcing anything, it was about control. And now money was involved. My wife leaned forward and said, "We're going to stop this, but we need more evidence." That's when Mrs. Klein pulled something out of her purse, a photo. She'd snapped it with her phone through the blinds. It showed the fake cop kneeling next to her mailbox, placing something inside. It was blurry, but clear enough to match the man from our footage, and his car, no plates. That was enough. My wife sent everything to a contact at the bureau, not to start an investigation yet, but to flag it. "If anything happens, I want this time stamped and documented," she said. Then she started digging. We ran facial recognition through public search tools and found a possible match. The man's name, Marcus Grant, former military police, discharged after a misconduct investigation, no law enforcement credentials, no private security license, no authorization to carry in any enforcement capacity. But he did have one thing: a connection to a private company registered under a fake HOA name, Oak Valley Community Enforcement Services. We cross-referenced it with a P.O. box and a Gmail account listed on one of the notices. That's when the paper trail got real. The business didn't exist in state records. It didn't have insurance. It had no legal authority to operate. But it was collecting payments from scared residents. That made it a scam, an impersonation of an officer. And because he was armed, potentially a federal crime, still we kept our heads down. Because Marcus didn't know who he was messing with. Yet, that weekend he came back, this time not just to drop off flyers. He knocked on Bill's door, the retired firefighter 2 houses down, and tried to issue a compliance warning over a hose left on the lawn. Bill told him to get lost, and Marcus responded by resting his hand on the grip of his weapon. That crossed the line. Bill got it on his Ring cam. We pulled the footage that night, added it to the growing folder, and submitted an updated report to the sheriff's department, this time attaching everything we had: videos, screenshots, documents, payments. But even then the response was quiet. "We're looking into it." No patrols. No interviews, nothing proactive. That's when my wife made the call. She picked up the phone, dialed a number from memory and said one sentence: "We've got an armed impersonator actively extorting people under a fake HOA. I need it flagged and I need it fast." Then she gave them her badge number. The tone on the other end changed immediately. "Yes, ma'am. We'll pull all associated data and send someone out." It wasn't just a local issue anymore. This was now on federal radar, but Marcus didn't know that yet, and the next move he made, he would regret for the rest of his life. Well, before we dive in, if you're enjoying this story and love real-life HOA drama, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Every new subscriber keeps me motivated to dig deeper, uncover more wild stories, and bring you even crazier content. Your support means everything. It's what keeps this channel going strong. And trust me, there's plenty more chaos coming your way. Back to the story. 3 days later, my wife pulled into the driveway after work. It was just past sunset. I was in the kitchen washing dishes. She texted me, "Just got home." 30 seconds later, another message came through: "He's here." I dropped everything and bolted for the front door. By the time I got outside, she was standing by the driver's side of her car, face to face with Marcus. He was blocking the path to our front steps. Same outfit, same badge, same pistol, and he wasn't backing down. "I've given you plenty of warnings," he said. "You've trespassed," she replied calmly. "You've threatened people, and now you're on my property armed for the second time." He sneered. "You think the cops will do anything? They don't care. I am the law here." Wrong thing to say. She stepped forward. "I'm a federal agent. You're impersonating law enforcement, and you've just made your last mistake." She reached into her coat and pulled her badge. "Not plastic. Not fake. The real thing." He froze. His eyes scanned the badge, then her face, then back to the gun on his hip. And in that moment, you could see the calculation happening. Could he talk his way out? Could he run? Would she shoot? She didn't have to, because I was already on the phone behind him with her bureau contact, live, giving a play-by-play. Help was en route. Marcus didn't move, not until she said, "If you so much as reach for that gun, I will take you down and you will not walk away from it." He turned, walked to his car. Still no plates, still trying to act like he was in control, and drove off. But this time we had everything: video, audio, background, pattern. The takedown was coming, and he had no idea how close it was. The moment Marcus left our driveway, everything changed. Not for us. We were already deep in the fight. But for the neighborhood, that night the fear started to crack. We shared the footage of the standoff with 3 neighbors we trusted. No drama, no public post, just quiet warnings. 2 hours later, the video had spread to nearly every household on our block. Phones lit up. Texts came in. "Is this real?" He pulled a gun. "Wait, he's not an actual officer." That's when the walls started to crumble. Until then, Marcus had survived on intimidation. A fake badge. A gun no one dared question. But once people saw him face to face with someone who didn't flinch, someone who challenged him, he lost his edge. My wife became the proof that he wasn't real. And now, the neighbors were ready to talk. The next morning, Naomi, young mom, 3 kids, used to keeping her head down, knocked on our door. She looked furious. Not scared, furious. "He told me if I didn't pay the lighting violation fee, he'd file with the city," she said. We asked her how much. $300. For too many porch lights. She pulled out a receipt from a shady mobile payment app. No real company name. Just a transaction labeled HOA Standard Enforcement. She thought it was legitimate until she saw our video. That's when she realized she'd been conned. She wasn't the only one. We made a list as neighbors came forward. $200 fine for an overgrown hedge, $125 for a noise violation. It was a 9-year-old's birthday party. $80 for vehicle shade tint non-compliance, $500 from an elderly couple, scared into paying a lien that never existed. The total: over $4,000 in fake fines, and every single one traced back to Marcus. Same signature. Officer M. Same threats, same scam. That was enough. My wife compiled the list, printed every receipt, timestamped every interaction. She submitted the new report to her bureau contact and also forwarded a copy to the state licensing division, because now it wasn't just impersonation, it was organized fraud. And the response came fast. 2 nights later, a black SUV pulled into our driveway. It wasn't Marcus. It was internal affairs. 3 agents stepped out, credentials in hand. They didn't need much from us. They already had most of the data, but they wanted confirmation. One sat in our kitchen and reviewed the footage again. When it ended, Marcus with his hand on his holster, then turning away after seeing my wife's badge, the agent nodded and said, "He's done. We're coordinating with the sheriff's department and the state board. Give it a few days." But that wasn't the end. Because Marcus wasn't the type to go down quietly, and he wasn't alone, the next morning, HOA-style flyers started showing up on doors again. But this time, they weren't fines, they were defense statements, typed in all caps, no headers, no name. "Do not listen to the federal agent. She is misusing her position. This neighborhood needs structure and security. Those trying to dismantle enforcement are putting everyone at risk." It was desperation, obvious, sloppy, and unhinged. But he signed it Oak Valley Compliance Office. Same fake organization, same lie. Only now, everyone knew better. Naomi texted a photo of her flyer with the caption, "He's unraveling." But what we didn't expect, Marcus showing up again. That Friday afternoon around 3 p.m., he pulled into the cul-de-sac, broad daylight, and started knocking on doors. But this time, people didn't cower. They recorded. One woman told him to leave before she called the cops. A dad down the street told him to get off his property or he'd have the city code enforcement on speed dial. And when he reached our driveway, he stopped. We were both outside, my wife trimming bushes, me checking the front spigot. He didn't walk up, just stood near the curb and shouted, "This isn't over." My wife didn't flinch. She turned, wiped her hands on a towel and said calmly, "You're right. It's just getting started." That night, the arrest warrant was approved. Saturday morning, the street was quiet, too quiet, until two unmarked cars rolled up to the house Marcus had been renting 5 blocks over. Neighbors watched from behind curtains and porch chairs as agents knocked, stepped back, and then, seconds later, moved in. He was cuffed and walked out in gym shorts and a t-shirt that reads security. No badge, no gun, no power. And as he was loaded into the back of the vehicle, one agent turned to a bystander and said, "He won't be back." It should have ended there, but of course it didn't, because behind every fraud like Marcus, there's always someone helping, and in this case, it was the woman who enabled the whole thing. Her name was Patricia Crowley, mid-60s, lived at the top of the cul-de-sac, been there forever, quiet, polite, always wore pearls and kept a clipboard with community notes scribbled on the back. Turned out she wasn't just an innocent retiree. She'd been helping Marcus draft the flyers, collect the money, and had even received consulting fees through the same shady mobile app. We didn't see it until someone forwarded us an old email chain where Patricia signed off as Acting HOA Liaison Oak Valley Division. There was no division, no liaison, just Patricia, helping a con man terrorize her neighbors. That email was sent to the bureau. And it wouldn't be long before she got her own knock at the door. By Sunday night, the street was buzzing again, but this time with relief. A few neighbors brought out lawn chairs and had drinks on their driveways. Someone turned on music. Kids rode bikes. For the first time in weeks, no one was looking over their shoulder. No one was getting threats. And as the sun dipped down, Naomi walked over with her toddler in one arm and a beer in the other. "You guys broke it wide open," she said. My wife smiled. We just didn't blink when he expected us to. But there was still one thing left to do, because Marcus may have been arrested, but Patricia, she hadn't even started sweating yet. Patricia Crowley had always looked like the sweet old neighbor. You know the type, watering her garden every morning, waving at delivery drivers, dropping off cookies to new homeowners. She even ran the unofficial welcome committee in our neighborhood. But behind the pearls and potluck casseroles, Patricia had been quietly pulling strings. And now, we knew. While Marcus was behind bars, Patricia was still trying to hold the reins of the operation. The flyers hadn't stopped entirely. In fact, a few had started appearing with her name printed at the bottom. Community update from Acting HOA Liaison Patricia Crowley. She wasn't even hiding it anymore. According to Patricia, Marcus had acted without her knowledge, and she was just trying to restore order after the chaos he caused. But here's what we found. Marcus used her address for fake payment routing. The Gmail account tied to the flyers was registered using her phone number. She received 4 transfers labeled consulting from neighbors who thought they were paying legitimate fines. We traced over $2, $100 in payments back to her. It wasn't just aiding a scam, she was a part of it. And now that Marcus was in jail, she was trying to rewrite the story. On Monday, she hosted what she called a community safety briefing at her house. About 10 people showed up, most out of curiosity. We sent Naomi, who brought a hidden recorder, and within the first 5 minutes, Patricia said, "Now that enforcement is paused, we need to look at voluntary compliance again. Otherwise, we risk drawing in the wrong kind of people." Voluntary compliance. What she meant was, she wanted the power, just without the badge this time. She even passed around a clipboard asking neighbors to sign a petition to reinstate localized HOA oversight. It wasn't legal, it wasn't binding, but it was her way of testing the waters. Until Naomi asked the right question. "Wasn't Marcus working under your guidance?" Patricia blinked, tight smile still frozen in place. "Marcus misunderstood his responsibilities. He was overzealous." Naomi followed up. "Did you get paid for helping him?" Silence. Then Patricia said, "Let's stay on topic." Too late. The next day, Naomi handed over the recording. My wife added it to the report, attached the payment trail, and submitted it to the Bureau and the state's Consumer Protection Division. We didn't have to wait long. Thursday morning, Patricia got a visit. Not from agents, not yet. This time, it was 2 investigators from the state attorney general's office. Civil investigators, not there to arrest, but to serve notice. The look on her face when she opened the door was exactly what you'd imagine. She clutched her cardigan like it would protect her from what was coming. But it didn't. They handed her a formal letter of inquiry, an official notification that her role in the fake HOA scam was under investigation for fraudulent misrepresentation, collection of unauthorized payments, aiding and abetting an unlicensed enforcer, and deceptive business practices under a false entity. She shut the door without a word. But it didn't end there, because this time the neighborhood pushed back too. That evening, we called an informal meeting in the park. We didn't need a board or a vote. We just needed people to speak up, and they did. Dozens showed up. Some with notes, others with receipts, and more with stories. One man had been threatened with a lien if he didn't repaint his shutters to match HOA colors. A mother of 2 had been told her kids were disrupting community harmony by drawing chalk on the sidewalk. Another elderly couple had paid nearly $500 over 3 months in compliance fees directly to Patricia via check. We collected statements. My wife compiled everything into a clean report and submitted it to the local district attorney's office the next morning. But something happened that we didn't expect. Patricia snapped. On Saturday, just before noon, flyers appeared again. But these weren't just threats or fines. They were personal attacks. She printed out screenshots of our video with Marcus and wrote "manipulated evidence" across them in red ink. She accused my wife of being a rogue federal agent who was harassing senior citizens and dismantling community values. She distributed them to every house on the block, and then she showed up at our door, clipboard in one hand, a printout of the petition in the other. "You're trying to destroy the neighborhood," she said. My wife didn't raise her voice. She didn't even stand up from her chair on the porch. She simply said, "I'm protecting it. You're the one who brought a fraud in with a weapon." Patricia's face twisted. "You're using your job to bully people." My wife stood up, stepped forward, and looked her straight in the eye. "No, Patricia, I'm using the truth. And I have no problem saying it in front of a judge." That was the last time we saw her on our property. A week later, the results of the investigation came in. Marcus was facing 2 counts of impersonating an officer, 3 counts of fraud, illegal possession of a firearm, criminal trespass, attempted extortion, and Patricia. She was being charged civilly, ordered to return every dollar she'd collected, and barred from participating in any HOA or governance structure within the state. The best part: the Attorney General's office issued a public bulletin using the words, "Unauthorized and fraudulent HOA activity conducted by unlicensed individuals operating under false authority." That bulletin went viral. Local news picked it up. Online forums reposted it. The whole town knew. People who'd once been afraid to say anything were suddenly celebrating. We didn't throw a party, but the neighborhood changed. The sidewalks got busy again. Kids played freely. Neighbors who never talked before were suddenly swapping stories and mowing lawns for each other. Someone even took a permanent marker and wrote on one of Patricia's old flyers taped to the mailboxes, "Nice try, Karen." My wife hung up her printed badge copy on our fridge next to that flyer, a reminder. not just of what we dealt with, but what we stopped. Because this wasn't just about one fake officer or one nosy neighbor with control issues. This was about showing what happens when someone abuses fear and then gets called out by the wrong woman. And as far as we were concerned, that justice wasn't over yet. The courtroom was cold. Not physically, just the way it felt, quiet, tense, like everyone inside knew something big was about to happen. Marcus Grant sat at the defense table in a wrinkled gray suit, no badge, no clipboard, no gun. Just a man who thought he could play cop in a neighborhood full of people who'd stay quiet. And sitting behind him, Patricia Crowley, still in pearls, still pretending none of this was her fault. But this time, she didn't have flyers, no petition, no clipboard. Just a court order demanding she repay every dollar she took and stay the hell out of HOA business. The judge entered. The room stood, and the trial began. The prosecution wasted no time. They showed footage of Marcus placing fake notices in mailboxes, confronting residents while armed, and most damning of all, standing on our driveway with his hand on his pistol, threatening my wife. The prosecutor turned to the jury. That woman is a federal agent. That man pretended to be one. This isn't just a scam. It's dangerous impersonation of law enforcement with a deadly weapon. Then they walked through the receipts, over $4,000 collected in fake fines, unregistered firearms, no license to operate as private security in any state, 0 HOA authority, a fake organization name used to pressure, fine, and scare people into compliance. The paper trail didn't just catch Marcus. It buried him. The defense tried. They said he believed he was acting within authority, based on instructions from Patricia and community leadership. They tried to paint Marcus as misguided, not malicious. They even suggested that my wife was looking for a fight because of her background in federal law enforcement. But none of it stuck, because we had one thing they couldn't counter: intent. Marcus wore the badge, he carried the gun, he made threats, and worst of all, he knew exactly what he was doing. When my wife testified, the room went silent. She stood straight, calm, professional. No dramatics, just facts. He identified himself as an enforcement officer of a non-existent HOA. He entered private property. He carried a firearm. He issued fake citations. And when I challenged his authority, he threatened me. The prosecutor asked if she feared for her life. She answered plainly, "No, but I feared for my neighbors, the elderly woman down the street, the mother with kids, the ones who didn't have training or a badge. They were the real targets. I was just the one who said no." That line hit like a hammer. Even Patricia flinched. After a short recess, Marcus took the stand. He looked smaller now, voice low, confidence gone. He tried to deflect, then blame Patricia, then say he only wanted to help the neighborhood feel safe. But the jury didn't buy it, because the facts didn't lie. The flyers didn't lie. The receipts didn't lie. And neither did the footage of a man reaching for a gun because someone dared to question his fake authority. The verdict came the next morning. Guilty on all counts: impersonating law enforcement, carrying a firearm, while committing fraud, attempted extortion, criminal trespass, conspiracy to commit deception. Marcus was sentenced to 4 years in state prison, with an additional 5 years probation. He was also permanently barred from holding any enforcement, security, or HOA-related position in any jurisdiction. Patricia, she got a civil ruling, fined $11,000 in restitution, banned from serving in any governance or HOA committee, and publicly named in the state's consumer protection database as a documented participant in fraudulent neighborhood governance. Translation: she could never hide this again. The day the ruling was finalized, the neighborhood felt different, lighter, safer, free. No more surprise citations. No more badge-waving intimidation. No more clipboards threatening community enforcement action. Instead, people started talking again. Kids rode their bikes without being warned about sidewalk violations. Lawn chairs came out. One guy even lit off a few sparklers in his driveway just because he could. And right in the middle of it all, Naomi handed out popsicles like it was a block party. We didn't plan one, but somehow we had one anyway. That evening we got one last message. It wasn't a flyer, not a threat. Just a plain envelope tucked under our doormat. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten. No signature, just a note. "You didn't have to go that far. You made an example of me. Hope you're proud." We knew it was from Patricia. My wife read it once, then tossed it into the fire pit without a word. She watched it burn, then turned to me and said, "We didn't make an example. She did that herself." Weeks passed. The story faded from headlines, but not from memory. Neighbors still talked about it when new people moved in. The HOA that wasn't, the fake cop, the FBI agent who shut it all down. But life was back to normal, better actually, because we didn't just get rid of a fraud, we rebuilt the neighborhood without fear. No board, no fines, just mutual respect. Someone even spray painted the old HOA sign out front to read, "Community First, not Fear." No one painted over it, and no one complained, because that's how things should have been from the beginning. The best part, a few weeks later, a reporter called. Said he wanted to do a follow-up story on what the neighborhood learned. Not just about Marcus, but about standing up to fake authority. He asked if my wife wanted to be interviewed. She declined, said this wasn't about her badge. It was about people who didn't have one, but found the courage to push back anyway. He nodded and said he understood, and then he asked me what it felt like watching all of this unfold. I told him the truth. Marcus thought he was in charge because no one ever challenged him. But the second someone did, he folded. Now, every time I walk past the mailbox or fire up the grill, I think about what could have happened if my wife hadn't spoken up, if we just paid the fake fines, if we'd let fear win. But we didn't, because fear only works when people stay quiet. And Marcus picked the wrong woman to threaten, the kind who doesn't blink, the kind who doesn't run, the kind who leads an FBI unit and doesn't need to shout to take you down. All she has to do is stand her ground and let the facts do the rest.